Okay, so today we're going to look at a thing called polynomial division. So it's doing algebraic division where we're dividing one polynomial by, in this case today we're just going to do linear expressions like x minus 3 or x plus 1 or 2x minus 1. Okay, so it might be presented like this. It might be find the solution to x cubed plus 2x squared minus 17x plus 6 divided by x minus 3. And in this situation, we're going to get a quadratic as our answer. So I can actually rearrange this equation and say, well, that's exactly the same as saying, well, x cubed plus 2x squared minus 17x plus 6 is equal to x minus 3 times ax squared plus bx plus c, because I've just multiplied by x minus 3 multiplied by x minus 3 times both sides of the equation by x minus 3. And actually now this is a relatively simple thing to think about, because how would I do this? Well, I would use my grid method. So I'm just going to present this like I would with my grid method, and I'd have x and minus 3 multiplied by ax squared, bx and c. And I know the answer, which is all going to appear in here, is going to be equal to this. So I take it one step at a time. I think, well, this first term has got to come from this top left corner. So I put it in. So I say, there's my x cubed. Now, if that was an x cubed, from that statement, I can now work out what the a is. So I can now work out that my a must in fact be 1, because x times x squared makes x cubed. So from that point, I scribble that out and I write the number 1. I mean, usually I don't write 1, but I'm just doing it here to emphasise. And then I can fill in this whole column, because I've got x squared times x makes x cubed, and I can also do the x squared times minus 3, which is going to give me minus 3x squared. Now, I need to work out how many x squareds I need. Well, I actually want 2x squareds in my final answer, and the x squareds always come from this part and from this part, because in this second bit that I've just highlighted, I've got so many x's times x. So these two together have to make my 2x squared. I've got minus 3x squared, so what would I have to put here to make those add to make 2x squared? Well, I'd have to have 5x squared, because 5x squared with minus 3x squared makes 2x squared. And that now tells me what my letter B is, because x times bx has to be 5x squared. So my letter B must be the number 5. And now I've done that, again, I can complete this whole column. So I've got 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x multiplied by minus 3 gives me minus 15x. And now I've got to think about how many x's I actually want. Well, if I look at my final answer, I want minus 17 x's. Where does the x's come from on this grid? Well, it comes from there and there, because I've got a number times x. So these two parts combine to make the minus 17x. So I've got minus 15x's already, so I need another minus 2x's. So what must my c be? Well, x times c makes minus 2x, so my c must be minus 2. And then this is where I have my check at the end. This tells me whether I've done it correctly or not, if it's a factor, and I'll explain that statement next lesson. But what is minus 6 times minus 2 times minus 3, that makes 6. And that's where I have my little check, because they have to match if you can divide fully. Okay, which is what we're going to assume for all of these questions. So, a bit complicated if you've not seen this before, but we'll carry on. I'll do another example. So, sorry, going to the wrong thing. Right, so now this time I've got to do 4x to the power 4 minus 17x squared plus 4. And again, I've got divided by 2x plus 1. Now, because I've got something to the power 4 divided by an x, I'm going to have an x cubed. Because if you want to know what power you're going to have in your answer, you take the highest power divided by the highest power in the denominator. And what's x to the 4 divided by x? That's going to be x cubed, okay? So we actually have ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. Now I'm going to rearrange this again, but I need to do something a little bit more careful because actually I need to write the fact that I've got no x cubes in this, minus 17x squared plus no x's plus 4. I know it seems a bit silly writing that down, but you really need to do it because it's really important that you don't forget the x cubes because we want everything to line up nicely. And we say, well, that's going to be equal to 2x plus 1 multiplied by ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. Now, you don't actually have to write this statement down, okay? But I would always write that part down personally. Okay, so going back to our grid method. So might need a bit more space this time. So we've got 2x plus 1 times ax cubed, bx squared, cx, and d. Let's do it one step at a time. So the 4x cubed has got to come from there. So I'll write my 4x cubed in there. So 2x times ax cubed makes 4x to the power 4 makes 4x to the power 4. So my a must be the number 2 because 2x times 2x cubed makes 2x to 4x to the power 4. Fill in the column. So I've got 2x cubed times 1 makes 2x cubed. Now then, this is where it's really important to write these 0x cubes in because I want no x to the power 3, no x cubes. And my x to the power 3 comes from here and from here. So that means I need to do a minus 2x cubed there because I want to get rid of those 2x cubes that I got previously. So 2x times bx squared has to make minus 2x cubed. So that means my b must be minus 1 because 2x times minus x squared would be minus 2x cubed. And then fill the column in. So that's going to be minus x squared. Now then, where do my x squareds come from? My x squareds come from here and from here. So these have to make minus 17x squareds. Now that means I've got minus x squared. I need another, minus 16x squareds because that's going to give me minus 17x squared. So that means cx times 2x has to equal minus 16x squared. So that means my c has to be minus 8. So fill in the rest of the column. So that becomes minus 8x. And then the final bit, where do I get my x's from? Well, I get them from there and from there. I want 0 x's. So that means I've got to undo those minus 8x's. So I need 8x there. So 2x times d makes 8x, which makes my d the number 4. And then I check, fill in the column. 4 times 1 is 4. Guess what? My check has worked. So if I do 4x to the power 4 minus 17x squared plus 4 divided by 2x plus 1, my answer is going to be 2x cubed minus x squared minus 8x plus 4. Okay? Right. And sometimes they can present it in exactly the same way, doing this. Okay, so I'm going to do it a slightly quicker way now because we don't necessarily have to write these things in as I've been doing before. I've just been demonstrating. So I've got to do x minus 4. I do it the same way. My 2x cubes come from here. So I write my 2x cubes in there. What times x makes 2x cubes makes 2x squared. Fill in the column. So I've got minus 8x squared. How many x squares do I actually want? Well, I want minus 5 of them. So those two bits are where the x squareds come from. So I need 3x squared because then 3x squareds and minus 8x squared makes minus 5x squared. So that becomes 3x on the top. Fill in the column. I've got minus 12x. Where do the x's come from? Well, they all come from here because you've got this term and this term. And I want minus 16x's all together. So I need another minus 4x's. So when I put those two together, I get minus 16x's. So I get minus 4. And then I do minus 4 times minus 4 is 16. And I do my little check. And there it is. So my answer is my A is 2, my B is 3, and my C is minus 4. So it becomes 2x squared plus 3x minus 4. Okay? Right, here's a few for you to have a go at. Press pause, do them, press play to see the answers. Okay, so here are the answers. So again, you fill in your grid method, you leave these parts blank to begin with, and then you go through doing the diagonals. Always check your check value at the end, which should be correct, and you should have got 2x squared minus 3x plus 5. For number 2, exactly the same way. So you're multiplying it by 2x plus 1, so you ended up with x squared plus 4x minus 3. And again, make sure you do that check value at the end. Okay, now with this one, please make sure you do this in where you write it out again with the 0x squareds. If you don't, it doesn't line up. You don't get this diagonals and everything lines up nicely. You've got to write each of the individual terms. Because then when you do this, you end up with x cubed plus x squared plus 4x plus 1. And the final one, okay, fairly straightforward one, and you should have ended up with 6x squared plus 5x minus 6. Okay, right, next step is sometimes they'll take it a little step further and they'll say divide 2x cubed plus x squared minus 18x minus 9 by x minus 3 and fully factorise and solve. Okay, now I'm not actually going to do this because I'm going to do this next lesson with you. Okay, so no, actually I will. I've changed my mind. So first step, we'll do the division. So nice and easy. So we've got our 2x cubed plus x squared minus 18x minus 9 divided by x minus 3. So I know I'm doing x minus 3 multiplied by something makes my 2x cubed and so on. So first step, this comes from the top corner. So I've got my 2x cubed here, which means I needed to multiply my x by 2x squared. Fill in the column, minus 6x squared. Right, what do I need though? How many x's do I need? X squareds do I need? I only need one of them. So that means I need an extra 5x squared, so that when I combine the 5, I do not, I need 7x squareds even. So when I combine the 7x squareds and the minus 6x squared, I get 1x squared. So that means that was 7x. So then I have minus 21x. Where do the x's come from? Well, they come from here. So how many do I need? Well, I need 18x minus 18x's. So that means I need to add a 3x. Because 3x and minus 21x makes minus 18x. So that means that must be a 3. That must be a minus 9. And I've checked it and it's worked. Okay. So hence fully factorised. So I know that my 2x cubed plus x squared minus 18x minus 9 equals my x minus 3 and my 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. And when it says hence fully factorise, what it means is you've then got to factorise that as a quadratic. Now we've done this plenty of times before, so I'm just going to do this in a little bubble over here. So I need to think of two numbers that multiply to make 6. Well, that's going to be 1 and 6. Do my grid method. I've got 2x squared, 6x, x and 3. Take out my common factors, 2x, so that makes x, that makes 1, that makes 3, and that's my check. And I know I'm doing this pretty quick, but you should be able to factorise as quick as that. It's really important that you can factorise very quickly in A-level maths. So when I fully factorise, I have x minus 3 times x plus 3 times 2x plus 1. And now I've fully factorised it. Okay? It says hence fully factorise and solve. So now I need to solve the equation to x cubed plus x squared minus 18x minus 9 equals 0. Well, what I've done by factorising, I've just said that is the same as that. So I can say x minus 3 times x plus 3 times 2x plus 1 equals 0. Now, just like we did with quadratics when we only had 2 brackets, the only way I can multiply two things together and get an answer of 0 is if one of them is 0. Well, it's exactly the same if I've got 2 brackets, 3 brackets, 4 brackets, 10 brackets. It doesn't matter. The only way I can multiply things together and get an answer of 0 is if one of those things that we're multiplying by is 0. So I say exactly the same thing at that point. Either x minus 3 has to be 0, or the second bracket, which is x plus 3, has to be 0, or the third bracket, which is 2x plus 1, has to be 0. One of those three things have to be 0. Now, the first two are easy, so that means x equals 3 or x equals minus 3. And then for the last bracket to equal 0, well, I want my 2x plus 1 to equal 0, which means my 2x must equal minus 1. Take 1 away from both sides. So my x must be minus a half. And they're the solutions that you get. Okay, so it's combining your division in your part A, where they're telling you what to divide by, so that you can write what your polynomial is equal to. Well, it's equal to a bracket times a quadratic in this case. You can then factorise the quadratic and then finally do the solve part. Okay, so here's 2 for you to have a go at. Press pause and then I'll show you the answers. Okay, so first one, polynomial division. Hopefully you're getting a bit more practiced at this. It starts to flow the more you do it. So the more practice you can do, the more that you'll get better at it. So we've got our single bracket times our quadratic. We have to factorise our quadratic and we're left with x minus 1, 2x plus 1 and x plus 5. Now note, this question just says fully factorise. It doesn't say solve. So at that point, this is my answer. I don't then go and say, well, that bracket equals 0 or that bracket equals 0 or that bracket equals 0. It hasn't asked me to solve it. It just says fully factorise. And I have done. I've got my factors. Now the second question does go on to say solve. But we start the same way. We do our polynomial division and we end up with our polynomial equals x minus 3 times 6x squared plus x minus 12. I have to factorise that quadratic and I get x minus 3, 3x minus 4 and 2x plus 3. But then the second part does say solve, so I do have to write that those 3 brackets multiplied together equal 0. And then just like I did before, either the first bracket equals 0, so x equals 3, the second bracket equals 0. So x equals 4/3. Now, if you're not sure how I did that, I said, well, 3x minus 4 equals 0. Add 4 to both sides, so 3x equals 4. And then divide by 3 to get x equals 4/3. And when the third bracket equals 0, again, you take away 3, so you end up with 2x equals minus 3. So x is minus 3/2. Okay? So go on Edmodo now, have a look at the worksheet. There's just a few more for you to practice.